Okay, thank you everyone for joining today. Welcome into the official kickoff event for this year's BDPA and NSBE from Entrepreneurs from Idea to Launch Entrepreneurship Initiative, which we uh, have conveniently deemed FI2L this year. So that's our abbreviation. That'll be what's popular and everybody knows in the years to come. But this is an initiative focused on equipping young entrepreneurs. And when I say young, I mean those with either new business ideas or businesses that are less than 3 years old or less than 500K capital raise. And we want to equip you all with the skills, resources, tools needed to build, launch, and sustain successful businesses based around technology and engineering. Our theme for this year is the future of sustainability is now. And this is the first of a 4-part virtual speaker series, which will speak to different topics, all tied to entrepreneurship. And this first one is entrepreneurial mindset, which will be led by Eric Williamson. So Eric, I'll turn the floor over to you. Let you introduce yourself in your own right. I'll get out of the way. I'll come back at the end.
Thank you, sir. Great to be with you all today. Thank you, Devin. Nikisha, I have a question for you. What do you think it takes to be a successful entrepreneur?
To be a successful entrepreneur, I think that you would definitely have to have a business acumen. I think you have to have clarity in who you're serving, what your product is. And I think that you have to have, I incorporate this in all things, high emotional intelligence.
Yes. I love that. I'm a big emotional intelligence person. That's a lot of things I teach and coach on. That's a story for another time, but I love your examples that you just provided. And I agree with you. I don't think you need to be a college dropout or be a technically savvy person or someone who just wants to take risks. You need to have those elements as well, but there's something else that you need. And it's basically what we're going to be talking about today, and which is you have to have the right mindset. You have to have a really good mindset in order to deal with the ebbs and flows, the challenges, the successes of being an entrepreneur. And so what I want to do is I want to take some time talking to you a little bit more about the kind of mindset that you need in order to be a successful entrepreneur and to deal with a lot of the challenges that are associated with it. So Nikisha or anybody else, if you have a new business idea, or whether you're someone who's just starting out with your business and it's relatively new, or maybe you have some business experience as well, at the end of the day, you're in the right place. Because if you're either of these three, if you fall into either of these three categories and you're looking for financial freedom, or you're looking to have a social or cultural impact, this presentation is going to be for you. So that's why today what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and how I got to where I am today. I'm going to talk to you about the key ingredients that I use to get to where I am in entrepreneurship. I'm going to share some examples of differences between growth and fixed mindset, which is extremely critical in your entrepreneurial journey. I'm going to talk about the role that emotions play in entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of emotions that are at play. I'm going to share my 3-step process to avoiding those knee-jerk reactions or those negative thoughts that come into your mind. I'm going to dispel the myths about motivation. A lot of times people think that motivation is the key or the salvation to going after it and being successful as an entrepreneur. Well, I want to dispel some myths about that. And also, we're going to talk about how to be an effective listener, which is one of the key ingredients that I used to get my success. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I like to tell people that I was an expert jerk who turned jerk expert. But really what I am is I am a conflict resolution expert. I also authored this book called How to Work with Jerks. And I work at the intersection between conflict management, emotional intelligence, which is what you were talking about, Nikisha, and leadership development. And I specialize in the arena of removing workplace friction. So that way people in IT, which is the niche that I serve, and engineering companies, they can achieve their goals. But I'm not the type of person that just goes into an organization to break up fights. I also introduce preventative measures that will mitigate the conflict at that moment and prevent it from occurring later on. And so I've had my business for about 9 years, and it wasn't always as successful as it is today. I'll share with you my main reason for starting my business, and that was because I wanted, just like some of you, I wanted financial freedom. I wanted to give people the tools that they need to manage conflict, to work better with jerks especially, but also to build relationships. And far too often I heard stories from my family, friends, colleagues, co-workers, all types of people about the difficulty that they've had with working with difficult people, also known as jerks, which is what I call in my book. Even with my own experiences and difficulties of working with jerks, that also inspired me as well. And I noticed that many of them, they left their jobs. They left their jobs because they were sick and tired of working with the jerk, and they wanted to pursue greener pastures where that kind of workplace toxicity, those kind of jerks no longer existed. But surprisingly, you can't just quit your job to rid yourself of working with difficult people. You're always going to run into those challenges. So they realized pretty soon that you can't escape it at all of it together. And you're going to need a set of skill sets in order to manage any kind of stressful situation, which is where I come in. But I noticed that because many of them were leaving their jobs, I noticed that there was one of the things that they all had in common was that they were all talented, they were all gifted people, but they couldn't deal with the stress. They couldn't deal with working with difficult people. And so that's why I realized that my solution that I could bring to the table is by making people aware that no matter how smart, talented, and gifted you are, no matter what role you serve or title you carry, success in entrepreneurship, success in whatever you do is not based on the work that you do. It's not based on how well you're able to solve someone's problem. It's really come down to how well you're able to build relationships, because you could be the smartest person in the room, but if people don't want to work with you, if they don't want to listen to what you have to say, if they don't like you, it's not going to drive any revenue. It's not going to drive to your success. And so that's one of the things that I learned. And that's one of the things that I help people realize. But when I started on my entrepreneurial journey, I was excited, like a lot of people might be. I didn't even know what I was doing though. Websites, business cards, the company name, no clue how to get started on that. But thankfully, my wife, she was able to help me out with these things. So that way I could focus on my product and who I wanted to serve. So when I finally got those things in play, I was nervous. I started realizing how nervous I was about telling people about it because I lacked confidence. I wasn't sure of myself. I had that voice of judgment in my mind. These people are going to hear from you. You've got the goal to start your own business. I started envisioning people hating on me and wanting me to fail, all these things. But it was really all in my mind. And that kind of ties me to that point, that the question that I asked earlier about what it takes to succeed. Because it really takes all these things that you mentioned before, Nikisha, about emotional intelligence and business acumen. All those things are extremely critical. But what it really comes down to is having a mindset, a positive mindset, a growth mindset. Because if you don't have that kind of mindset, it can manifest itself. You can start becoming what you think about. And that's what started happening to me. Because I had that voice of judgment in my mind about whether or not I was going to succeed, doubting my skills, being shy, it all kind of manifested itself into me doubting myself, being shy about telling people what I did, and also asking for help. I wasn't sure the right way to do it. And so I started developing that confidence and sharing my business with others. Once I started participating in various business organizations like Chamber of Commerce events, other nonprofit organizations, and I started getting to meet people on a smaller scale, and I started getting comfortable with explaining to people what I do and who I serve, but I still didn't have it right, because the first few years of my business, I was in the negative. All right, I was embarrassed by that. Every time it was tax return time, and I had my accountant go through my stuff, he would always say, yep, and and as far as your business is concerned, you're negative. Your expenses far exceeded your income by a lot, by thousands and thousands of dollars. My expenses, such as my domain, my website, my traveling expenses, it far outweighed the money that I was receiving. And also, check this out. So when people ask me how much I charge, I would say something like this. I would say, I can work within your budget. And that's because I didn't have the confidence to charge people what I was really worth. And to be honest with you, I really didn't know what I was worth. But I knew that I was worth way more than what I was initially charging. But because I didn't have the confidence, I was just getting out there. I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that I wanted to get started somewhere. So in order to make people feel comfortable about working with me, I was saying that, hey, I can work within your budget. And right at that moment, it devalued my business. It lowered my value as a business. And that's something, and I had to really overcome that. One of the first clients that I had was a nonprofit organization. And I was charged, my first fee that I charged was $500 to deliver a speaking program to high school students. Then months later, I was able to accept another opportunity where I was helping some inner city youths that were previously convicted, helping them steer the right path by helping them with social skills. I made a deal of having to deliver 24 programs, training programs for life skill courses, at about $2,500. Think about that: 24 programs for $2,500. I'm a terrible math person, but the math doesn't add up. I was woefully underpaid. And part of that had to do, like I said before, I didn't understand my value, and I always erred on the side of caution to get the business first and figure it out later. And so because I was setting myself up for failure in that sense, that's one of the reasons why I was always in the negative. And so I was getting to the point where I had to make some changes if I wanted my business to improve or was going to die. And I'm sure a lot of you know that saying about businesses. What is it? 9 out of 10 businesses fail within the next, I don't know, 4 to 5 years, something like that. Well, that's the trajectory where I was headed. So I had to take the obvious course of action. I had to seek some help. And so one of the smartest decisions I ever made was I hired a coach that could help me with the speaking business. There is a big difference between having a great product and then having business savvy, or having that business acumen. And Nikisha, you mentioned that spot on in the beginning. And so I didn't know that difference. I knew that I was a great speaker and I had a powerful message to share. And I knew that there were people who needed to hear that message, but I was not business savvy at all. And once I got my coach, I told her, I said, I don't even know what it's like to make any real money. The year after, I think shortly after COVID, actually a little bit before COVID, I earned some money, maybe a few grand. But then during COVID, that's where things really started, changing for a lot of people. That was my biggest year. That was one of my biggest years since, not to date, but since that moment of me starting out was the year of COVID. Not only did my business start to increase with help from my coach, but I landed my first $250,000 deal. And I was through the roof. I was on top of the world. I had all the confidence in the world that I needed. I was a bit in disbelief that a prospect wanted to work with me for an 18-month period for $250,000. But I realized that this stuff works, that yes, it is possible that you can do this. And so people ask me, and some of you may be curious, how the heck did you do that? How did your business improve during one of the greatest, biggest moments in business history of COVID, such as COVID, that happened, that impacted everyone's business, where the economy tanked? How did you start? How was that the beginning of your best years? But then also, how did you break a deal of $250,000? Well, I'm going to show you some of the key ingredients to that. But before I do that, I got to share with you some of the other mistakes that I was making. So hopefully you won't do the same. The first mistake I was making is that I was wasting precious time doing the wrong things. I was wasting time learning the business. I wasted time not learning the business of being an entrepreneur. Didn't know how to have sales conversations. I didn't know how to market myself. I was a great speaker, but I was a terrible business person. I wasted precious time failing on my own before I decided to get a coach. So I was behind the curve, years, I could have probably been a lot further years along had I invested in a coach. I realized that as an entrepreneur, you have to work on your business and in your business. Yeah, I was a great speaker, but I didn't know how to have business conversations with people. So I needed to get better with that if I wanted to succeed. The second mistake I was making is that I didn't know how to talk to prospects at all. I didn't understand their wants or their needs. I lacked confidence. I was unsure of myself. I shied away from sales conversations. I was disengaged. I had what we call a fixed mindset. We're going to talk about fixed mindsets coming up. But my coach, she helped me learn how to do outreach. One of the things I hated to do, because I relied on referrals by word of mouth. And that was really my bread and butter, if you will, for getting any kind of business. But I had to create more relationships with people in order to generate more business. And so I had to get myself out there. The third mistake I was making is that I thought that I can do all this on my own without any help. Because I thought of myself as such a great speaker, but I needed help from various people, my wife, my coach, people within my network to scrutinize some of my ideas, challenge my way of thinking, help me help me with other speaking opportunities. I had to be able to admit that I needed help. And that's one of the mistakes that I was making. I felt I was kind of too proud for it. But once I was able to learn from those mistakes, like I said, I turned the corner. So I started making some significant improvements. Not only did I get more business, but like I said, I landed that $250,000 deal. So here are the key ingredients for that. The first thing is mindset. I had to adopt a growth mindset. I had to believe that I can be successful. I had to believe that I can earn significant amount of money. When I first got my coach, within the first 2 weeks, I was saying, well, coach, it's been 2 weeks and I haven't made any money. What's going on? And so she asked me, she said, are you reaching to the right people? Are you talking to people? How many people are you talking to a day? And once I looked at my numbers, I said, whoa, I need to slow down. I need to be patient in the process. So I had to practice that patience, and that helped me with my mindset because I knew that it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was going to happen through small steps of those kind of improvements. The other thing was I had to focus. I had to focus on the right things. So instead of focusing on cleaning up my office, stalling doing that, wasting time doing that, or organizing my emails or browsing the web, I had to understand who I am, what I do, and who I help. And so once I was able to understand that, it helped me realize the mistakes that I was making before. So one of the things that I had to learn was that I had to switch niches. So one of the niches I was working in before COVID, right? I think the year before, maybe like kind of during COVID, it wasn't the right niche to work in at that moment because there were a lot of changes going on in that niche. And it was like bleeding from a stone, right? It's almost impossible to do. So I decided, since my program can really touch a wide variety of niches, I decided to select a niche that I was going to have those same kind of monetary challenges. People who actually needed my services, but it wasn't going to take, pulling teeth in order to get that help. So I was able to switch my niche. And then I was able to learn how to practice gratitude. So I was able to appreciate the small wins. For a while, I was measuring myself based on how much money I was earning from any of my speaking gigs. And that I was being short-sighted because I was missing out on all the steps that it takes in order to build your business. So instead of saying, oh, my win for the week is getting that big client, I changed my mindset. And now my gratitude is I celebrate wins of the steps that it takes in order to do that. So, hey, I spoke to 5 people today. That's a win because I had a tough day and I didn't think I was going to speak to one person. That was a win. So I had to acknowledge those kind of small wins and large wins as well. The other thing is relationships. I realized that I needed to invest more in the relationships that I was trying to build with people. I had to have more conversations with the right people, not my fans, not people that support me, like I see here in the chat, like Devin, and maybe even Timothy, who, they're fans, right? They're people who want to support me, but they're not my target audience. They're not the decision makers who would have the decisions in authorizing me to work with that specific company within my niche. There's a big difference between getting a bunch of likes on a social media post versus those one-on-one conversations that you need to have with appropriate decision makers who see the value in your product and want to invest in you. It's a huge difference. Once I started focusing on them, I had to tailor my message on who I served and the value that I bring. So this helped me be able to become a better listener. So I had to listen more intently and identify the opportunities where I can offer value. So for example, I was able to provide introductions to people who might need help. I was able to give people information, resources, articles that could help them with their specific situation. I was able to give people copies of my book to help them with their situation so they can work better with jerks. And so the more value that I provided others and the more I helped them, the more people saw me as indispensable. They in turn would also help me out. And the more opportunities that became available for me, I realized that rather quickly. I went from being a vendor, which I consider, there's all types of vendors that people deal with, that organizations deal with. But instead of being seen as a vendor, I was seen as a trusted advisor. Think about this. If anyone here eats Chinese food, there's a long menu list, right? You've got egg foo young, you've got garlic chicken, General Tso's chicken, all these types of things. But instead of being seen as a vendor who could provide all those kind of resources, I really focused on that top two things that I was really good at. And that really set me further apart from any other people that was in my network, because I was able to be an expert in one or two items instead of a general person who was familiar with a variety of other topics. So I had to really listen to what people's needs are and focus my needs based on that. So I went on a listening campaign. So now what I want to do is, now that I talked about those keys to success, I really want to talk about the growth versus the fixed mindset. Because when I started my business, and for a while I had a fixed mindset, I didn't think that I was capable of making that kind of money because I wasn't making that kind of money and I didn't have any experience doing that. But someone who has a growth mindset, they view things such as starting a business or any other talents or skills as learnable and capable of doing that. So even though finance isn't my strong suit, because I started my business, I would need to be familiar with doing my finances, but I didn't let that deter me. So I didn't say, oh, well, I can't start my business because I don't know anything about budgeting. I don't know anything about accounting. I figured, hey, you know what? I'll learn how to do that. And so once you understand that growth mindset, that it's learnable, that it's achievable, then that can help inspire you and get you in the right mindset that no matter what hits the fan as an entrepreneur, you'll be able to learn through it, you'll be able to show up, and you'll be able to deal with it. Versus a fixed mindset where you think there's a cap on your growth. There's a cap on how much you're able to learn how to do. So that's a big difference that I want you all to understand. And just so that you all know too, the concept of growth and fixed mindset, it was coined by a psychologist named Carol Dweck in 2006. She has a great book out there that's called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success. And so I encourage you to check that book out, definitely to help you understand the differences between growth and a fixed mindset. But I think it's something that you should definitely be aware of. You definitely want that growth mindset. The other thing I had to do was I had to practice the art of recognition. The art of recognition is what I have in my book, How to Work with Jerks. And this is a level of self-awareness that you need to master in order to be an effective entrepreneur. And this puts you in the right mindset to help you put your head on a swivel. It's the ability to understand your emotions and what's causing you to feel a certain way. And once you're able to understand your emotions and what's causing you to feel a certain way, you can make sounder, more strategic decisions. So that way you can see yourself more clearly and initiate change. So how do you practice recognition? One of the first things you can do is start asking for informal feedback. This could be, if you allow your ego to be your amigo, this will keep a lot of people from reaching their true entrepreneurial potential, because some people don't want to get feedback from other people about how their business is performing or what things they should be doing or how to ask for help. But when you ask for informal feedback, case in point, I reached out to Devin, I reached out to Timothy, and several months and years prior about some of my conflict resolutions programs, about what I can do to bulletproof it, what I can do to really improve my program. And their informal feedback helped me to deliver excellent programs to certain organizations. So you have to be able to ask for informal feedback, no matter how intimidating it might be, no matter how much you may not enjoy getting that feedback that you just don't want to hear. It's all necessary when you are pursuing your entrepreneurial journey. The next thing is think regularly and write in a journal. This is an absolute must for an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur, remember I said, you have to not only work in your business, but you have to work on your business. And in order to keep track of all those things, you have to be able to document it. So I use this journal, it's called the Best Self Journal. And this allows me to plan my day in the beginning of the day about the meetings that I have on my plate, the activities that I need to accomplish. And then towards the end of the day, I can look right back at it and I can see what I accomplished, how my day went, and the things I need to do in order to improve on the next day. And the other thing I did was I took a personality test. I needed to figure out just what my mind goes through, or how I respond to certain stressful situations. Maybe I'm a type A kind of person, or if you're doing the DISC assessments, maybe I'm the letter D or an I, things like that. So I could really understand how I respond during certain situations. The next thing I had to do, which I think everyone should do, is start asking the question what, not why. Because when you ask the question why, such as why is my business failing? Why can't I get the right prospects? Why can't I achieve be as successful as this other person here? When you ask the question why, you're not improving, you're not seeking solutions, you're just venting. And so that's when you start asking the question, what can I do to work better with prospects? What can I do to improve my business? And when I started asking the question, what, I started taking swift action, such as hiring a coach, such as understanding my target audience and what I need to do to tailor my message to those specific people. So that's extremely important. The next thing I had to do is I had to understand my core emotions. Now when we talk about this section, you're gonna, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are a little shocked by some of the things that I'm sharing about emotions, because emotions, they're a powerful thing to have, but if we invest too much into our emotions, it can really, really derail anything that you do, and especially in entrepreneurship. So there is this author, her name is Mel Robbins, and she's the author of The 5-Second Rule. And it is one of probably the most powerful books I've read in the last 3 years. And what she says is that almost every decision is made based on our feelings, and they are almost never aligned with what's best for us. So in the moment, feelings make you second guess ourselves. We can opt for what feels good now versus what we should do. And once you understand the role that feelings make, you're going to learn how to manage them. A Portuguese neuroscience scientist, his name is Antonio Damasio. He devoted much of his time into neuroscientific study for how feelings motivate the mind. And feelings, according to him, his research, feelings decide for us 95% of the time. So basically, we are feeling machines that think. It takes up all of us. So subconsciously, we can weigh the pros and cons of each scenario, like what do you want to eat? But subconsciously, we're saying, what do I really feel like eating? When you ask a question, do I want to share my business idea? What we're really asking ourselves is, do I feel like sharing my business idea? When you have that question, do I want to talk to this prospect? The question that we're really asking ourselves is, do I feel like sharing my idea with this prospect? So feelings make your decisions, and they do not align with your goals. So you have to separate what you feel versus what you need to do. And once you untangle those feelings from actions, you can unlock your full potential. So that's why I had this chart here that that has a list of our core emotions. And in order to effectively manage our emotions, we have to understand that emotions are neither positive or negative, but it's what we do with the emotion that creates the outcome. And so here are a list of emotions, and some of them may be perceived as positive, and some of them may be perceived as negative. But when we're sad, when we feel the emotion of sadness, it's really telling us that we lost something of value. And a lot of times it can, people think that it's a negative feeling as well. But it can be positive because it can improve our attention to external details. It can reduce judgmental bias. It can increase perseverance, and it can promote generosity. When you see the feeling of anger, a lot of times people think that it's a negative emotion, but it can be positive as well, depending on what you do with it, because it can increase optimism or creativity. It can affect performance. And research suggests that if you express anger, you'll be more successful in negotiations and succeeding just out of anger alone. The same thing with fear, right? Fear can be positive because it can get us to achieve greater heights. Same thing with a lot of these other emotions too. So definitely check out this chart here. We can perceive them as positive or negative, but to the right, it really shows us what it tells us, what the emotions really mean to us. So once you get in tune with your emotions, you can manage them much more effectively. And here's how you do it. I have a 3-step process. It's called Assess, Analyze, Act. And this 3-step process helps you keep your emotions in check, helps you manage them. It really helps you stay focused on the activity at hand. So the first step is to assess the situation. So when you're stressed out, when you're doubting yourself, when you're talking to yourself, when you've got that fixed mindset in your ear, you really need to take time to assess the situation. So when that happens, our body tells us this. Our heart could beat fast, our palms could be sweaty, we could furrow our eyebrow. We can do all types of things to indicate that we are under a stressful situation, or where we have a negative, we're having some negative responses to certain situations. Once we assess what our body's feeling, then we can analyze why. Oh, I'm nervous about speaking to this prospect because they're going to call shenanigans on my idea, or they're going to laugh at me. And so once I analyze that, then I could take a step back. I could take a more measured approach, and I could respond thoughtfully. And let's be real here, y'all. Think about this to yourself. How many times have you just gone to the step 3 when you've had to share your idea with someone, or when you've been stressed out, you've been talking to a prospect, and you say the first thing that's on your mind? And I'm sure 9 times out of 10, you probably regretted your response. Either you probably said the wrong thing, or you probably could have said a better thing. But because you didn't process through those emotions in this 3-step process, you weren't able to put your best foot forward. So now what I want to do is, I told you before about certain myths to motivation, and I want to share them with you right now because they're true. They seem true. And I think, once you understand the role that motivation plays, I think it'll really help you with your mindset. Because when it comes to motivation, you have to understand that there's science behind it. There are 2 types of motivation. There's intrinsic motivation, and there's extrinsic motivation. And so the part that is intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, those are the motivators who are coaches, who are people like Devin and Timothy and Nakisha, and all types of people who can help you get motivated and can coach you along the way, especially if you feel stuck. But when you have intrinsic motivation, where you have to rely on yourself to motivate yourself to get through that barrier, that's where things start to go downhill. Because when it comes to changing your life, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you have to understand that intrinsic motivation, that it's not going to be as helpful as extrinsic. And so here's some of the myths that I come across when I hear motivation. When people think that motivation is something good that helps me feel ready, well, to do anything, to start your business, to work on your project plan, or any of those things, right? And you feel like once I'm motivated, that's going to help me get ready to do that. Well, let me share something with you. When you think about what change requires, it requires you to do things that are scary, that are uncertain, or that they're new. But here's the problem. You're never going to feel ready or motivated to do those things that are scary, irritating, hard, or new. And if you can accept that reality, then you've got the secret to managing that change. Here's the other thing. Motivation is the key to success. No, that's not the case either. Successful people are not achieving great things simply because they're motivated. They're creating change and making life happen because they make a conscious decision to show up and put in the work every day, day in and day out. The other myth that I hear is that being motivated helps me make better decisions. Well, when you come to any decision you need to make, forget about whether or not you feel motivated to do it. Instead, ask yourself, does the decision expand my life or does it shrink it? If it expands your life, the answer is always yes. All right. Yes, you should always do it, but make sure the decision, if it's scary or uncomfortable, if it makes you feel like that, but you still think that's going to expand your life, you definitely want to do it. But if the action that follows expands your life and makes you doubt yourself, or that you don't feel like it's something that you want to pursue, then I would err on the side of caution and not pursue that. But knowing that you cannot feel like it and you can still push yourself forward to create change is also very empowering. So the first step in doing the thing that you don't want to do, but you need to do anyway, that's what you really need to do. Not being motivated. It's the ability to do things and stay disciplined and to do things no matter how scary, irritating, or frustrating it might be. It's not being motivated. It's being able to do it anyway. It's what I was talking to Devin earlier. Hey, it looks like you showed up today, right? You got to be able to show up day in and day out. So now I want to spend a brief moment here doing an activity here, because I talked about being an effective listener, and that's extremely important. So what I'm curious to hear from anyone here is, what are some barriers to effective listening that you have? Or what is your worst listening bad habit? Feel free to type it in the chat or take yourself off mute, but I'm curious to know, what is your worst listening bad habit?
This is Nikisha. I think my worst listening bad habits is the urge to interrupt if I have a good point.
Yeah, yep. I can relate to that too, Nikisha. Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes I do that too, especially when I'm talking to my family members, like I'm talking to my kids, and I'm saying, no, listen, do it my way, all right? And they say something like, but Daddy, and what they have to say is actually a good point. And because I didn't listen to them, I made them do something wrong, or I made them do something opposite of what they were supposed to do. Same holds true when I talk to other business colleagues as well, or anybody else for that matter, and I lose focus on what that person actually needed to share. I do things sometimes where I'm thinking about my response before I want to, while I'm listening to someone else. I interrupt I've interrupted people sometimes. Those kind of things are really bad. And a lot of times when I'm talking to prospects, if you don't take that time to listen and just not even say anything, sometimes I couldn't embrace the pause. I couldn't embrace it being quiet, because it's like, it's awkward, right? But when you are not saying anything, when you're in the moment and you're listening, you're giving someone an opportunity to really share what's on their mind, express what their needs are. And this is vital to talking to any prospect, especially when you're trying to determine whether or not they're a good fit for working together. So you need to be able to listen, avoid those listening bad habits. And also, I've got some other listening ideas for you also, as a resource that I'll share with you after this program. One of the best listening skills that I've used is called listen, understand, and validate. This is short for LOVE. Being able to listen intently to a prospect, to their needs and their wants, being able to understand their needs and wants by asking follow-up questions to make sure you understand it, and then validating their needs and wants. That shows that you're in the moment, but you've given the respect to your prospect that what they have to say is important, and that you're not just looking at them as a number or a dollar sign. You're looking at them as a person who needs help, and that you've got the key, you've got the resource to help them out. So we're coming towards the end of this here. I'm curious to know, based on the information that I shared, what steps do you think you might want to take to improve your entrepreneurial mindset?
I think there was actually every point that you made, I think is a very, very necessary point. Things that stood out for me and my personality and behavior is the motivation factor, and that it's not about, that you're not motivated. It's just doing. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, and you have to have the discipline to do it. Um, the other, what was the other point that really stood out to me? Oh, the journaling piece. Kind of taking record and taking note of what you're doing, progress. And I'm a journaling person anyway. At any given time, I probably have 3 journals going. And so I think it is really important to take note and record, if nothing else, just for your progress and to be able to have something to hold you accountable, that you are staying on track, or that you need to work on some things. So those were the 2 things, in addition to the active listening piece, because I do think that's really important. And although I think I'm a good listener, that urge for me to want to interject, especially if I know what someone is saying is false or is not, it's not factual, then I have a tendency to not discipline myself to not interject. So that's a good piece. And for the reasons why you said, because the interpretation of interrupting may have, the look of you're really not identifying what your audience needs or what they're saying. And that's not what I would ever want to, that would not be my intention. But I also like the listen, understand, and then validate. Like, one of the things that I say sometimes is, so what I hear you saying is, just to make sure, because just because you heard someone say something doesn't mean that you've understood or interpreted it accurately. So those are my points.
Right. Nikisha, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I can tell just by you, but just by that feedback alone, you're definitely going to be taking some swift and constant action on your business journey as well. You're so right about that. You touched on a couple of things that I want to just expand on a little bit too. When you talked about the motivation piece, I can't tell you how many times where I've said to myself, oh, man, I don't want to do this. And then I stop myself and I'm saying, there you go, Eric, complaining again, right? Like, I catch myself saying that and I say, all right, well, once I catch myself saying that, it kind of gets me out of the rut and say, look, I know you don't want to do it, but do you need to show up? Do you need to have the successful business? Do you need to make some improvements? You got to do it, because no one's going to do it. No one's going to help you. No one's going to come in like Spider-Man and save the day. And so I'm not saying that same thing will apply to other people, but for me, because I started becoming self-aware of what I say to myself, and how I say to myself, oh, I don't feel like getting up for this meeting or anything like that, I catch myself doing that, and it helps me change my mindset to focus on saying, just show up, Eric. And then the other thing you said about listening and understanding and validating, I remember one of my coaches, because I've had other coaches in the past, and one of them said, when he was starting out in his business, he said a client came up to him, or an attendee for a conference came up to him and said, you should really have group coaching, because I feel like I work much more effectively in group coaching. And so my coach at the time responded, well, all I do is one-on-one coaching. So, that's what I do. But he failed to listen that this is how this person wanted to buy from him. He wanted a group coaching package. And so once he realized, he was like, wait a second, listen to what this guy's saying. He's saying that he wants to buy from you, but he wants to do it this way. You being able to listen to that instead of focusing on what you do, that can really help you make some drastic improvements as well. And I'm looking in the chat here too. I see Timothy in here, Tim here. Great to be with you again, Timothy. It's been a while. I look forward to reconnecting with you this year. I love your comments in the chat too. You talk about active listening, discernment, and disciplined trust. You got to have that disciplined trust when it comes to working on your business, because motivation, it ain't going to do it. You got to understand yourself by doing a self-assessment, whether they're Myers-Briggs, DISC assessment, emotional intelligence, 360-degree assessment, which is my favorite one to do. Those absolutely critical. He also says we need to know when we are being jerks and adjust our behavior. Right, and you do that through a self-assessment, through asking for feedback. You got to get outside of your comfort zone in those situations. So thanks, Timothy. I really appreciate you sharing that as well.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yes. And so these are some, so I'm glad that, thank you, Nikisha, for outlining some of those steps that you're going to do to improve your mindset and your journey, your entrepreneurial journey. But also what I want to share with you is that I've got this QR code here. If you want to get access to a lot of the resources that I have available to help you build those relationships with people, to help you understand the right mindset that you need, or if you have some other questions that you'd like to ask me outside of this today's talk, scan this QR code. It'll take you directly to a sign-up form. You can sign up and get access to my information. If you'd like to schedule some time to talk to me a little bit more about your entrepreneurial journey, I'd be happy to schedule, to share 2 to 3 ideas to help you with your situation. All you got to do is scan the QR code and you can schedule some time with me. So I hope that this was helpful for you all. But just remember, no matter how smart, talented, and gifted you are, no matter your experience, what title you have, or role you carry, success as an entrepreneur isn't based on the work that you do. It's based on the relationships that you build. In order to build those relationships, you got to have that growth mindset. And so that's really going to help you early and often in your entrepreneurial journey. So I wish you all the best success, and let me know if there's anything I could do to help you out in your entrepreneurial endeavors.
Thank you so much. I found everything extremely informative. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I will be reaching out to you as well.
Great. I look forward to it. And I'll put this QR code back here just in case you need to scan it again.
Nope, I took a picture of it.
All right. Great.
No, thank you, Eric. Thank you for sharing with us today and kicking off our virtual speaker series for our 2nd annual FI2L Entrepreneurship Initiative between BDPA and NSBE. So we appreciate you, Eric. Definitely take advantage of the resources that Eric has shared here today and connect with him. Definitely a down-to-earth guy who's willing to share what he knows and help you navigate what you have going on. Timothy, anything from your end before we close?
No, it's a great session. I'm so glad we're able to do this again. And the energy, the information you shared with all of us is going to just, I'm glad we're able to capture it for posterity. Really look forward to chatting with you again, Eric. And of course, great job, Devin. And those of you who haven't already signed up for the conference, please put it on your schedule, put it on your priority list. We are going to be meeting again in Atlanta. And we'd love to have everyone on this call and all your friends to come on down to Atlanta for BDPA Con 23.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, we will end the call. We'll let you get back to your day. But thank you again, Eric. Thank you, Nikisha, and everyone who joined. This will be available on our YouTube, I believe, so we'll let this live. National BDPA is the channel. So we'll make sure this is available for everyone to view. If you weren't able to be in the session, you can still get the content. So this will be available soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.